You both, I think, have mentioned Saul Kripke. I think another good way, because the using Quine as, I guess, not a foil in this case, but as a comparison was pretty enlightening. I'm wondering if using Saul as a foil will help shed light on how David used possible worlds before we get into some more of his particular uses. Like I have counterfactuals, mental content, this sort of thing in mind. But how did his treatment of possible worlds differ from Kripke's?
Okay, I went first last time, Frank. Do you want to go?
I'm sure Graham has a better grasp of Kripke's views on possible worlds because he has the advantage of actually having spoken to him about it. Kripke is one of my philosophical heroes, along with Lewis. I'm just going to wave to my wife. She's about to go off somewhere. So they're both, heroes of mine philosophically. But there's a big difference between them. Lewis's writings are full of clarifications of exactly what he meant when he said this and that, and what he'd say to this or that objection. So I feel I have an excellent grasp, or reasonably grasp anyway, of what Lewis thought. Kripke wasn't really into that, so to speak. He wrote this incredibly important book, Naming Necessity, and other important stuff besides, but particularly Naming Necessity. And of course, he did respond to various comments people made about the book, but it wasn't in Lewis style. So you can't open up an article and read Saul Kripke's 6 replies to the questions people might have asked about this, that, and the next thing. So that's why I find myself limited in commenting exactly where Kripke would stay on this particular issue. That's partly why I think Graham has the advantage, because, of course, he was a colleague of Kripke's for some time.
Yeah, look, I don't think that gives me an enormous advantage because you're dead right, Frank, that Saul was very coy about this matter. Saul's a very interesting thinker. Maybe we should do a discussion of Saul sometime. But Saul was very, very careful never to say anything that he thought might be wrong. And if you read Saul carefully, you will see that everything is very carefully qualified with, this is only a sketch of a theory. Look at the footnotes where he sort of says, well, I think this is only an idea, it's more complicated than that. So he was never blunt in the way that David was. And when it came to the status of worlds, I don't know there's anywhere that I can remember where Saul lays out his account of what worlds are. He certainly did not agree with David's view. So to take one example of this, if you consider a world where the US did not invade Iraq, to pick up Frank's example, David said, well, you've got to consider a world where the US didn't invade Iraq, but of course the US only exists in this world, so you've really got to think of a US counterpart as invading an Iraqi counterpart in this world, and then you get that kind of story to be told. And Saul thought this was crazy. If you're talking about the US invading Iraq, you're talking about the US invading Iraq, okay? So you're not looking at some other possible world. You're kind of talking about a scenario that you posit by fiat, as it were. So he didn't like David's counterpart theory. But this is just an illustration of the fact that he sort of disagreed with the theory. I don't know that he ever really spelt out what he took these postulations by fiat to be. If he had a view, And when he came to quantification, he was a Quinian as well. I think he'd have had to think of them as some kind of abstract object. Because you're quantifying over them, they therefore exist. They're not sort of physical alternatives, so they've got to be some kind of abstract alternatives. But I don't know anywhere where he sort of spells this out in detail.